I spent $310,000 building a house for my parents by a quiet lake. And if you think this is just a wholesome story about gratitude, you're wrong. Because what happened next forced me to choose between family and everything I had built. And I promise you this. By the end of this story, you'll understand why sometimes the people closest to you are the ones you have to protect yourself from. My name is Riley. I'm 32, and I work in contract administration, which means I don't believe in assumptions. I believe in proof, in structure, in making sure that what belongs to you actually stays yours. But this didn't start as a legal lesson. It started when I was 19 and my father, the strongest man I had ever known, was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And over time, I watched something I couldn't stop. His hands began to shake. His steps became slower. His confidence quietly disappeared. And through all of it, my mother never once complained. She didn't ask why this was happening to her life. She just adapted. She became his support system in every possible way. Managing medications, appointments, routines, lifting him on days he couldn't stand properly, and still finding a way to smile like nothing was wrong. Like this was just another chapter she was willing to carry without help. And that's what stayed with me the most. They never asked for anything. Not from me. Not from anyone. And maybe that's why I decided one day that I would give them something they would never ask for but absolutely deserved. I didn't have the money overnight. There was no sudden success story. No lottery. Just years of discipline. Saving. Working. Sacrificing things I wanted so I could build something meaningful instead. And 2 years before everything changed, I found the land. A quiet lake hidden away from noise and pressure. The kind of place where time doesn't rush you. And the moment I stood there, I knew this wasn't just land. This was peace. So I bought it and I started building. Not just a house, but a solution to every problem I had watched my parents struggle with. Wide hallways so my father could move without fear. No stairs anywhere. Support rails blended into the design so they didn't feel like a reminder of weakness. A kitchen built around his reach so he could still feel independent. A wraparound porch so he could follow the sunlight without effort. Everything designed with purpose. Everything built with care. And when it was finally complete, I didn't stop there. Because I understood something most people ignore until it's too late. If you don't protect what you build, someone else will eventually try to control it. So I placed the property into an irrevocable trust. Legally binding. Untouchable. Only my parents as beneficiaries. No selling. No renting. No outside interference. Because I knew that even good intentions from the wrong people can destroy something beautiful. The day I showed them the house, I told them we were going out to dinner. Nothing special. Just a normal evening. But instead I drove them to the lake. And when we arrived, my father went completely silent. My mother looked at me like she didn't understand what she was seeing. And when I handed them the keys and said, "This is yours," something changed in that moment. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. That weekend we sat together watching the sunset, eating simple food, talking without stress. And for the first time in years, they weren't just getting through the day. They were actually living. And I thought that was the end of the story. I thought I had done what I came to do. But peace like that has a way of attracting attention. And 3 days later, my sister Vanessa found out. And everything shifted. Because Vanessa doesn't create problems instantly. She studies situations. She waits. She finds the angle that benefits her the most. And her husband Craig is even worse. He doesn't see emotions. He sees value. Numbers. Opportunity. And the moment they arrived, it didn't feel like family visiting. It felt like an evaluation. Craig was already walking around the property, checking the structure, measuring the dock, taking pictures like he was preparing a listing. And something in my mind immediately clicked. This wasn't curiosity. This was calculation. We sat down at the kitchen table and Vanessa smiled like everything was completely normal and said, "We just think this should benefit everyone." And before I could even respond, Craig placed papers in front of me. Rental projections, seasonal income estimates, $40,000 per season. "We can list it this week," he said. Confident, almost excited. like he had already made the decision. Like my parents' home was nothing more than an asset waiting to generate income. And in that moment, I realized something that changed everything. They didn't see the years of sacrifice behind this house. They didn't see my parents finally having peace. They saw profit. And that's when I understood exactly why I had taken legal precautions from the beginning. I calmly stood up, walked to my bag, and brought out every document I had prepared. The deed, the trust, the legal protections, township regulations. And then I showed him something he didn't expect. His own listing draft, already uploaded online before even asking permission. And I looked directly at him and said, "I've already reported it." And for the first time since he arrived, he had nothing to say. No confidence, no explanation, just silence. Vanessa tried to shift the situation, saying we're family, saying I was overreacting, saying I was being controlling. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just said something simple that changed the entire tone of the room. "Your guests." And then I followed it with something even more direct. "You need to leave." And sometimes the most powerful moments aren't loud. They are quiet and final. They left that day not happily, not peacefully, but they left. And that night, as we sat together again in the same house that had almost been taken from them, my father said something that stayed with me. He said I didn't know I was allowed to say this is mine. And I told him you are. Because that's the part people don't talk about. Love is not just about giving. It's about protecting what you give so it actually remains meaningful. And in the weeks that followed, there were attempts to come back into the situation. Messages, pressure, even someone showing up claiming there was a booking agreement. But none of it worked because everything had already been secured. Every loophole closed before it could be used. And slowly things became quiet again. Not perfect, not untouched, but stable and real. And one evening, I returned to the house unexpectedly and found my mother sitting peacefully on the porch reading and my father near the water just watching the lake. And when he saw me, he smiled in a way I hadn't seen in years. A real smile. Not forced, not tired, just present. And in that moment, I realized something that made every sacrifice worth it. I didn't just build a house. I built a space where they could finally live without fear of losing it. And that's something no one, no matter who they are, has the right to take. Because at the end of the day, the hardest lesson isn't building something valuable. It's protecting it from the people who think they deserve a piece of it just because they are close to you. And if you've ever had to stand your ground against someone who thought your effort was their opportunity, then you already understand why sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't to give more. It's to stop and say this is where it ends.